COVID-19 patients, and the demand for vaccines has more than doubled. So far, the East African nation has reported more than 55,000 infections and 392 deaths. And in Nigeria, the coronavirus has worsened an already severe oxygen deficit at health centers in the country. In an effort to learn lessons from India, which of course has grappled with significant oxygen shortages, the Nigerian government has begun constructing oxygen plants in each state of the country. And India has reported the world's highest single-day death toll from COVID-19. The country reported more than 6,100 deaths after a large eastern state revised up its toll. India also reported 94,000 new cases, which brings its total caseload to over 29 million. And that's a recap of some headlines today. And now to some international news. British Prime Minister Boris Johnson and United States President Joe Biden have agreed to a revitalized Atlantic Charter in their first meeting. Now, the two leaders have met for their first face-to-face talks in Cornwall on the eve of the G7 summit. President Biden says his counterpart should not let the row over post-Brexit trading in Northern Ireland affect the peace process. He also stressed the need to stand behind the Northern Ireland Protocol. Now, the document seeks to build on common principles to address new challenges, including climate change and cyber attacks.
We talked about how our two nations can together lead the global fight against COVID-19. That's been a major focus of the G7 under British leadership, particularly in focusing and coordinating our resources to help vaccinate the world. And tonight, I'm making an historic announcement regarding America's leadership in the fight against COVID-19. America knows firsthand the tragedies of this pandemic. We've had more people die in the United States than anywhere in the world.
Well, speaking of cyber attacks, the world's largest meat producer, JBS, has confirmed it paid a ransom of $11 million to cyber attackers. Now, last week, a cyber attack temporarily halted the company's operations at 9 beef processing plants in the U.S. and led to disruptions at other facilities. JBS said the payment was made to prevent any further disruption and potential risks for customers. Now, travel across Europe is now possible this summer. The European Parliament on Wednesday gave a final approval to the EU travel certificate. Come July 1st, all member states will have to issue and accept the passes, which hold the promise of a near return to hassle-free travel. Here's Tony Waterman with more from Brussels.
No surprises here. EU lawmakers voted overwhelmingly in favor of the COVID travel certificate for both European and international travelers. These passes could help avoid the nightmare, as one MEP called it, of summer 2020 travel when there was a patchwork of restrictions in place across the bloc, many of which still exist and are inhibiting the free movement of people. This certificate, which is free, will verify that a person has recovered from COVID, has tested negative within 72 hours, or has been fully vaccinated with an EU-approved vaccine, although member states can decide to also accept WHO-listed jabs, which would now include Sinopharm and Sinovac. With this pass in hand, though, travelers will not be subject to additional restrictions like quarantine or testing for the next 12 months. Of course, there is an exception to this if there is a COVID-related health emergency like the emergence of a new highly contagious variant. But Wednesday's vote really clears the way now for these certificates to come into full effect on July 1st, when all member states will be required to issue and accept them. 9 member states, including Greece, Spain, Croatia, Germany, they are already doing this. And according to the Commission, more than 1 million EU citizens have already received their COVID certificate. Facilitating hassle-free travel will be crucial to kickstarting European economies, many of which are just now starting to ease restrictions after months of lockdown. We have bars and restaurants that are reopening, even for indoor dining. Non-essential travel bans are being lifted, and curfews are now being relaxed. There is now just one last tiny hurdle to clear. The EU Council has to formally adopt the text, which is expected to happen in the coming weeks. Tony Waterman, CGTN, Brussels.
Now, as governments are taking measures to safeguard public health, in South Korea, the country has introduced new bus air purifiers to ease people's minds. And industry insiders also found opportunities and necessities for these new technologies. Here's Joseph Kim reporting.
South Korea's metro public transportation system is considered one of the best in the world. Clean, comfortable, and on time. But COVID-19 has kept passengers away. So officials are hoping to ease people's minds by introducing cleaner and safer buses, free of harmful viruses and fine dust.
Amid the coronavirus pandemic, there was mounting anxiety over public transportation being a possible site for infection and for pollution. However, our public transportation systems now simultaneously remove fine dust and kill viruses, relieving people's anxiety and meeting their expectation.
On the ceiling of these clean buses are air purifiers. They can filter up to 99% of fine and ultrafine dusts and more than 93% of viruses and bacteria using UV sterilization. They've been a success so far, running on 3 intercity bus routes, and there are plans to expand the program.
Even before the new coronavirus, there have been many deadly viruses and bacteria. So even after the pandemic ends, we expect products that have sterilization capabilities to continue to be a necessity, as dangerous antigens will continue to exist.
The city of Seoul has also introduced new high-tech virus-free bus stops with amenities like Wi-Fi and air conditioning. Hopefully, these measures will attract commuters back. Amid the coronavirus, the number of subway and bus passengers plummeted almost 30% last year, according to the city.
COVID-19 and climate change have altered everyday life. They've accelerated the adoption of innovative health technologies, like this virus and fine dust purifier. But analysts say these devices are not just trends, but staples that will stick with us even after the pandemic ends.
Even in the post-coronavirus era, the interest and demand for healthcare-related products will remain high, especially among younger consumers who have higher concerns about their health.
Industry insiders say these new technologies, which aim to safeguard consumers and prevent deadly diseases, will become the new normal. So, if companies miss the opportunity to create new products and technologies, they may miss the bus and just watch a new world go by. Joseph Kim for CGTN, Pyeongtaek, South Korea.
Meanwhile, Malaysia is in the midst of its 3rd national lockdown, but the vital electronics sector has been allowed to continue operating, though with only 60% of its normal workforce. Now, Malaysia plays a critical role in the global semiconductor supply chain, and that's never been more important than now amid surging demand and a worldwide shortage. Well, Rian Melzer now reports on this from Kuala Lumpur.
Think of cutting-edge electronics, and Malaysia might not spring to mind. But its electronics exports are worth close to $90 billion a year, and semiconductors are a key part of that.
Malaysia actually is a supercritical node in the semiconductor industry globally. Every industry that is using chips today is touched by Malaysia. All the major players are here, and they have been here for a number of years as well, and more coming.
We have about 100 multinational in the country, many Fortune 500 companies. We are involved in assembly test manufacturing and some of fab manufacturing. So that is really part of the whole supply chain for semiconductor, and that goes into the products.
Not only have companies had to wrestle with the impact of the pandemic, such as workforce restrictions, and disruptions to supply chains. The semiconductor sector in Malaysia has also had to cope with the global shortage of silicon wafers.
Suddenly you see that the demand is much higher. So for the companies in Malaysia, they have to cope with the increased demand. And so most of them are either expanding, building more space, or hiring more, doing whatever that is needed to meet the demand for their customers.
Industry people say that companies in Malaysia have learned to better cope with the challenges of the pandemic. And during this latest lockdown, electronics companies are allowed to continue operating, albeit with a reduced workforce.
It truly has become an essential industry. So for Malaysia, there was no choice but to keep it open, to keep Malaysia and the global supply chain active and viable. It's certainly not the most ideal situation, but they've got the systems and processes in place. They're working very closely, and we're working very closely with the government as well.
Maintaining smooth operations for this crucial cog in the global supply chain for products ranging from the most mundane to the most essential. Ryan Meltzer, CGTN, Kuala Lumpur.
And shifting focus now, let's take a look at commodity markets today. Copper prices are falling. They were hit by fresh concerns about price controls after surging producer inflation strengthened China's resolve to keep commodity prices in check. Meanwhile, oil prices rising ahead of U.S. inflation and jobs data, rebounding from the previous day's data that indicated weak demand for fuel during the U.S. driving season. Meanwhile, gold reversing earlier losses to edge up after data showed U.S. consumer prices increased more than expected last month. On that note, let's take a short break, still coming up. We bring you an Egyptian startup that does the heavy lifting for grieving families.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
I've been Tunis, Cairo, Juba, Johannesburg, Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
course, the loss of a loved one could prove financially challenging. Well, in Egypt, a startup is now making waves by rivaling traditional undertakers. The firm offers a full range of funeral and burial services to its customers. And as Terry Wangari now reports, the company advocates for equality regardless of socio-economic status.
The death of a loved one could sometimes be unexpected. At times, lack of planning may throw a family into disarray. Sogna, which is Arabic for calm, offers full-range burial packages. The aim is to free grieving families from the usual logistics and bureaucracy. The company helps nearly 90% of its clients with hospital deals, as well as circumventing established networks for burial services.
Some of the clients cannot afford the service. We help them and sometimes we offer the service for free so that we support them in such difficult time. Death doesn't discriminate between rich and poor. For us, this is not our target to earn money. Our aim is to help people at the time and to change this field in Egypt so that everyone can be buried in a civilized way like anywhere in the world.
Sogna's services range from $300 to $600. During funerals, uniformed staff are on hand to arrange chairs, umbrellas, and napkins.
At first, there was a rejection and a lot of pressure, but with time, people in the industry started cooperating with us and see how we help them in developing, not just by developing themselves financially and doing it in a more organized way, but also the social stigma around them.
Sogna's offer is a far cry from that of traditional Egyptian undertakers like Mohammed Mahmoud, who has been caring for Cairo's dead for nearly half a century. He provides coffins, a car and driver, but with less of the sleek, modern presentation favored by Sogna.
The service ranges between $64 to $89 for washing the corpse, the car, the coffin, etc. Then this company comes and charges you $300 to $500. As hospital management, how are you okay with that?
Those who have used Sogna's services have a different view from this.
I felt like the young men standing were part of the family. They put up umbrellas, water bottles, and even set up the speakers to play the prayers all the time. They played Quran fast and then came the prayers. They surrounded you all the time. They ask you if you need anything. The girl's mom stayed for so long after the burial, and we asked her to leave, but she refused. They stayed behind until the end.
Sogna also offers add-on services that go up to $319. But Gabala says no prices can be equated to giving a loved one a proper send-off. Terry Wangari, CGTN.
And let's head to Ethiopia now, where the World Food Programme says the hunger situation is worrying. The UN agency says at least 4 million people in Tigray are in dire need of food. Here's Chao Mgono with more on that story.
In an abandoned construction site in Tigray, Aster, not her real name, has a temporary dwelling. She is a victim of a recent attack by a local gang, which destroyed her crops and burned down her house. With neither food nor shelter, she now banks on hope for her daily survival.
There were about 20 of them. They gathered around my house and destroyed all my crops. I have nightmares of my house from before it was burned down. We had to flee to another area. They kept getting closer, burning all harvested crops and straw, and continued setting fire to everything. They burned everything I had.
Aster is one of the many displaced residents of Tigray in Ethiopia who are in the grips of a crippling food shortage. The ongoing armed conflict in the region that began in late 2020 has aggravated what was an already bad situation in the region, according to World Food Programme.
So this is a region that even prior to the conflict has been affected by shocks in recent years. We had the desert locust this past year, hailstorms, some pockets of the region that are already chronically affected by drought. it means that this is an area that's already a bit on the edge. And so now with the conflict, the disruption of health systems, the collapse of markets in many areas, the inability to plant today because people don't have access to seeds, fertilizer, or the security to be able to plant, means that for WFP, the #1 priority is going to continue to be that humanitarian assistance until the situation allows people to resume their livelihoods activities and meet their own food security needs.
The UN body says it is shocked by the latest data, which says at least 4 million people are in dire need of food supplies. The organization has already deployed 180 humanitarian workers to distribute food to 1.4 million residents. But 350,000 people are reported to be facing catastrophic levels of hunger. The Ethiopian government approved distribution of humanitarian aid to the region in February. Government insists that proper humanitarian aid is being delivered in Tigray. Chamgono, CGTN.
Well, before we leave you today, a quick look at Africa's currencies. Now, South Africa's rand broke a 3-day losing streak today when, of course, it lost about 2.5%. And those losses deepened late on Wednesday when struggling power utility Eskom said it will extend power cuts in the country. Meanwhile, Nigeria's Naira stable at the parallel market, gaining marginally against the dollar at the investors and exporters window today. That's as foreign exchange supply rose in the country. However, the Naira did remain unchanged at the unofficial market, trading at above 400 Naira per dollar today. Well, that's it for this edition of Global Business Africa. Remember, you can send your feedback to the contacts on your screen. You can also follow us on our various digital media platforms. From me, Uche Okoronkwo, and the rest of the team, thanks for watching.